Hi, so my name is Mark Crocker. I'm an Associate Director here at the Center for Applied Energy Research, which is a research center incorporated within the University of Kentucky, and I'm head of the Biofuels research group here. We're focused really on thermochemical routes for the conversion of biomass to biofuels. So rather than using biological methods such as enzymatic degradation of biomass or using microbes, for instance, we're focused more on thermochemical approaches. So we use heat combined with catalysts to break down the biomass constituents into much smaller units, which we can then process into fuels. Algae are of interest in the context of biofuels because they are the fastest growing photosynthetically active species on the planet, or organism, I should really say. In other words, they grow much faster than terrestrial plants. And why is that of interest? Well, their growth is based on the utilization of CO2. Essentially, they're taking CO2 and under the action of sunlight, and hence the process of photosynthesis, they're converting that CO2 into biomass. And you can then take that biomass and you can process it into liquid fuels, as well as other types of fuels such as biogas, for instance. There are many companies in the US and around the world who are looking at utilizing algae for the production of biofuels. Realistically, I would say that biofuels production on a large scale from algae is probably in the region of 5 to 10 years away, probably closer to 10 years away. A couple of potential drawbacks. First of all, you do need a lot of land. Algae are typically cultivated in large open ponds. The sunlight will only penetrate to a depth of something like 4 to 6 inches. So your ponds really have to be extremely large in terms of the space they're occupying. And of course they do need a supply of water. So you really need to be located either next to an underground aquifer, a river, or by the sea if you're growing saline algae. We have a lot of it in Kentucky, and we rather wish we didn't have it here. So it's not very popular here, and I think any attempts to actually farm kudzu for the production of biofuels will probably be resisted fairly heavily. It really takes over any land where it's planted or where it's introduced. So it's really regarded as something of a nuisance here. Sweet sorghum, yeah, it's a plant which grows fairly well in Kentucky, and it's particularly interesting because it has a high sugar content, and so it could perhaps be viewed as a potential alternative to sugarcane for the production of sugars which can be fermented to ethanol. The advantage, of course, is that unlike sugarcane, which is restricted to tropical climates, sweet sorghum will grow widely across the US. It grows particularly well in Kentucky, in fact. Hemp has a somewhat checkered reputation in Kentucky. At the UK, we're not actively looking at the use of hemp for the production of biofuels, but I know it has been suggested by various people in the state. I think one would have to overcome a certain amount of resistance, particularly on the part of the authorities with respect to the large-scale cultivation of hemp. There are alternatives to ethanol, one being butanol. And butanol can also be produced from the fermentation of biomass. And the advantage of butanol is that it has higher energy density than ethanol. It's not as hygroscopic, that's to say it doesn't take up water as readily, and so it can be transported in pipelines and trucks which are currently used for transporting hydrocarbon fuels, so you don't need a separate fuel system. And it also has higher energy density than ethanol, so really it can be viewed largely as a drop-in replacement for existing hydrocarbon-based fuels such as gasoline. So it's really a very attractive fuel from that perspective. There's really no silver bullet to our energy situation. It's going to take a combination of technologies. One is going to need to increase use of renewables, so not only biofuels produced from various biomass sources, but also wind energy, solar of course, possibly tidal. I think that will happen eventually of its own accord, because as demand for energy worldwide increases, and bearing in mind that we appear to be nearing peak production in terms of crude oil, one can expect that the price of oil and hence of gasoline will progressively increase in the future. And there's going to come a point where a lot of biofuels which currently are not economically viable will be cost competitive with gasoline. So I think that that's inevitable. Most projections suggest that we could replace between 20 and 30%, probably 30% as an upper limit of the current amount of diesel and gasoline which is used in the US with biomass-derived fuels. If you want to further decrease our reliance on petroleum, then you're probably going to have to do that by switching to hybrid vehicles and ultimately electric vehicles. Energy conservation is really the low-hanging fruit. There's a lot we could do there to improve the efficiency with which we use energy. Unfortunately, the initiative just hasn't been there to date, and it's really going to take somebody to actually drive that and introduce legislation which will not only provide incentives but will perhaps mandate the use of more energy efficient processes, more energy efficient building materials, for instance.